We're going ballistic, Mav! We're throwing exhaust nozzles on this F-14 Tomcat from Freewing. You'll see why. Welcome everybody back to another episode here at Just Plain Crazy. I'm Brendan. I am down in the lair today, and we are going to talk about the Freewing F-14 Tomcat from Motionrc. More of my upgrades coming your way, and when I say I don't mean mine specifically, I mean what I'm doing to my plane. This hobby is straight up about giving credit where credit is due, helping each other out in a brotherhood, and I got some help with a project, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing to the Tomcat, and we're going to talk about FSA and the effects that it has on this plane. So the first thing I want to do is give some shout outs to some people that helped me along the way to understand this. This all started way back with a buddy of mine, Ronnie London. Talked to him about, hey, my Tomcat is not got good power, my Futura does. He had done some testing on those motors. We talked back and forth, and I said, I got an idea. I'm going to throw them FMS V2 Platinums in this Tomcat. I did that testing. Links somewhere in this thing, I'll pop up. Turned out really, really well for this plane. At that point, we started to talk about FSA. He gave me some information on it. We talked about it a little bit. I never got around to doing anything. I did get around to flying the Tomcat, and man, this thing made a difference. So what is FSA? FSA is fan swept area. So Freddy's Custom Creations on Facebook made me a set of nozzles. And I don't have a 3D printer. I don't do 3D printing, so Freddy's Custom Creation, link down in the description below. Check the guy out. He's the one that did the 3D printing for me, as well as a friend of mine by the name of Donnie Clark. Donnie Clark also did some 3D printing of the same tools and the same fan assemblies. So they use different material. I weighed them, checked them out, and found some differences in them that I liked. Wound up going with one set, and I do have some spares, but both guys deserve credit for helping me. Freddy's Custom Creations, Donnie Clark, there's a picture of Donnie. And also, I got hooked up with Freddy's Custom Creations through a good friend of mine, Kenny Sprouse Jr. So here's a picture of him. All right, and there's the shout out. So let's get to this. Now, this all came from and was designed by a gentleman that reached out to me after he did my fan mods in his F-14, and he goes, these things work great. I want to adjust the FSA. I'm actually going to make an STL file, and he shared it on Thingiverse for these nozzles. So Christopher, I hope I don't butcher your last name, my friend, Klupel, or Klupel, he is from overseas. He actually designed these to the right FSA. So FSA stands for fan swept area. So he gets the credit for these. And what does the guy do? He doesn't sell them to people. He goes ahead and he puts up the STL files for everybody to get some enjoyment out of the hobby, helping everybody out. He would have sent me some, but shipping from overseas was crazy. But there's more people that are willing to help a brother out when needed. So anyway, fan swept area is basically you are taking the inlet size of your fan assembly, you are minusing the cone and basically helping this motor to breathe at optimum efficiency. So the inlet on an FSA rating, you want the inlet of these runners to ultimately be 100% of that FSA, that area or that distance in the inside. And Christopher calculated that out, just as my friend Ronnie had done and given me some recommendations. Chris did the math and made the pieces, so he took it just one step further. Now, there are calculators down in the description below. I'll throw a link for the calculator. It's in there as well. But imagine if you're trying to breathe and trying to breathe through a straw, how difficult that would be, right? So that's why FSA coming in is important. You want to make sure the motor can pull in air, and also you don't want it too big, because as you're trying to fly, that thing is just like a fire hose shoving air in the front, and you can't do anything with it. All of this stuff has an effect on amperage, which is current draw, battery life, heat, all of those things that make a plane not likable to fly. So I wanted to make the upgrade here on the nozzle, and you can see that we have one done, and get you just a little bit of an understanding. So on the outlet side, you want to be like 85 to 90% FSA. And what that does is, if you can imagine exhaling, okay, trying to exhale really hard through, like, to say, pursed lips, or trying to blow out a candle with your mouth wide open. Those are the two effects that this outlet has. You have to make it just right. So with all those calculations, this new nozzle, when I measure this inside diameter, is 72 millimeters. And that got us right in that 85 to 90 FSA, where here, if we check this out on the inside here, we are at 60, 68. So the difference between factory at 68 and then the new ones at 72 make a big difference. And where did I start to notice this? I started to feel this when this thing was full throttle, when the wings were swept, and I was starting to make a couple circuits. After 2, maybe 3, you know, that's a long time, number one, to be in full throttle, but I started the whole time to notice I had to keep it there because it was starting to slow down just a little bit. And I have a feeling that FSA is why. So now that we opened up this, we had to use this tool on the inside to open up that foam in there as well. And, you know, the tools like we're going to talk about, I wound up cutting some notches in them to make them work better. I did notice that they didn't hold up on the end pins with these 3D prints. Those broke off, but that foam proved to be a little tougher than I expected. So again, you know, when it comes down to this, I can't static thrust test these. I'm not going to be able to use a scale like I did in my other testing to prove these out, to say, oh, look, it makes a difference. The best thing to do here would be to have real life telemetry where you can measure motor temperature, where you can measure voltage sag, where you can measure current draw, and then actually fly this in the same conditions, wing swept, full throttle, and compare data before to data after. I don't have the ability to do that right now with this because you don't get that type of telemetry out of the factory stuff. And it's not like Freewing did anything wrong here. The reason of the change is, again, because I took out the factory motors and I went with the version 2 Platinum fans. Where can you get real telemetry, black box data? Let me show you guys my next go round. This is my Jetty Duplex Special Edition Carbon DS12. This thing will have, with using the right ESCs, be able to give you true graphable black box data. So if you want to know, did I lose reception? You want to know, was it a voltage failure or something else? You can actually go back in those graphs and look at that stuff. That's what higher end radio systems really give you. So I'm going to start to phase away from the Spektrum. I don't know if I'm ever going to put this plane on Jetty or not, but we might give it a try. But the nozzles are a easy upgrade. And as I said, give credit where credit is due. We're here to help each other, not out trying to sell the stuff. And like I told you, I got some more modifications here I want to get to showing you as I innovated these things in a free or next to free format. So check these out. All right, let's check the weight of these nozzles. The factory nozzle that I cut off is going to be right at 42 grams. So that's 42 grams times 243. So you're going to be at 84 to 86 grams with the factory nozzles. And then the new 3D printed nozzles are going to be 40 grams, so just a little bit lighter. You can actually get that down a little bit for the guys that are good at 3D printing. I don't get into 3D printing, so there's a way that you could set the print quality, I hear, that you can actually make these lighter, but I'm going to show you how to make them a little bit lighter so the things we do to them don't actually add more weight. But with both of those, we will actually be under what the factory one is. The first step before we do anything, guys, balance your aircraft. Know where your CG is before you start making any modifications to the weight. Although it would be small, whether nozzles, afterburners, you know, other components, all those things have an effect. These EDFs do not like extra weight. They have a downside when you start making them fat and chubby. So check your CG before you make any modifications. The first thing we're going to do to get off these old nozzles is we're simply going to take an X-Acto knife and just literally trace right around the edge of the nozzle. There's really no way to get that thing out without breaking off the end of the little lip of the foam. So all I am going to do with a nice sharp X-Acto knife is just cut my way around using that plastic on the nozzle for a guide. Gonna work my way around the whole thing. Wiggle. See what the hang up is there, just a little bit here at the top. And she comes off. Pretty nice and clean there. All right. So now we have to get into prepping it for the new one. All right, for the tools that are included in the STL files, all right, the two different ones that I talked about earlier, I tried using both of them on a drill and they both had the same effect, which was they broke the end off. So for you 3D printers, maybe you have something a little bit more robust. But the goal is here now is I want to open this up to the same diameter as the inside because this is smaller right now. And if you just take the smooth one and you're threading that in there, it will go. But it takes a while. So what I did is I took this thing over to the grinder and I just rough cut some grooves in there just to act as biting teeth. And if you wanted to make it all pretty, you could definitely do that. But then all you got to do is just sit here and just start turning and working this thing in, and it will go ahead and open up that diameter. So you're almost like threading this thing in, and you can thread it in as far as you want to. The other thing is maybe you could put a bolt or something here in the end that would grip in that 3D printed material a little bit better. But anyway, let's go ahead and make this hole the right size. So the first thing I'm going to do to this is every one of these sections that's here, we're going to go ahead and take a drill, and I'm just going to drill a hole every other block, and then that way it's going to actually take out a little bit of weight. But what it's really going to do, and the whole purpose for it, is really to give me a surface for the glue to really sink into and hold. And like I said, this is like an 1/8 inch there. And now I'm going to make 3 holes kind of across from each other in this whole scenario, so I can put in my carbon rod. So one there, almost like a triangle pattern. And then that hole that I just created, I'm going to take some of this carbon rod and insert it into here, and then we'll trim those off and then leave a little bit of length there to stick into the foam. And then we'll come back and we'll actually glue those things in down into the holes. there. And that's going to be pretty decent as far as edges go, and a little bit of ability to tack into the back of the plane. And you can see, so we were about 40 before, right? 40 grams. So we drilled some holes, entered in a little carbon, and we'll put in a little bit of glue. And weight-wise, so we're at 39. So we shaved maybe a half a gram off, a little bit of weight anyway. But we're not adding actual weight to this in order to make this assembly work. So better gripping edges, a little bit of centering ability there with those carbon into the foam. Let's get them installed. All right, guys, so painting these is very simple to make them look nice and weathered. They already come in a decent gray appearance the way that they were printed out for me, so that's not too bad already the way it is. I'm going to simply use some Rust-Oleum 2X black and some Rust-Oleum 2X silver. And the first thing I'm going to do is just take some silver, and I'm not going to just coat the whole thing to death. I am literally just going to give it kind of a coating on the outside. I don't want it to be a completely solid silver color. And that's all that takes. And then we're going to go through with the black, and I'm just giving a very light mist over what's on there, and that'll just give it a duller finish. And then we're actually going to take some sandpaper to that, some 3M roughed up, looks like Brillo pad almost, and then we're going to scuff that in and bring some of that silver and gray back to give it a nice weathered look. So we'll let this dry, and then we'll take you down and do that in the layer. So there that is hollowed out. That's pretty far in until, like, you notice that it's, you know, there's not much resistance in there. It does leave the foam a little rough, so if you wanted to, you can either smooth that out with some tape, or, you know, rub it over with spackle if you want to, something in there to smooth that out. Obviously, the smoother the airflow is in and out of that fan unit, the better off we are going to be. So again, here's what I did. I cut notches. It does work a lot better on a drill, but I cut notches in the side to help me. And like I said, I just wound up running a big lag screw in the end of that in order to be able to put it on the drill and get in there. So the other option too that you can look at is using some of that aluminum ducting tape, and I might give that a shot and see what that looks like. And there you can see the finished product on our nozzles. I'm pretty happy with the way that those things turned out. And if you go to line this up now with your foam tack glue, and we're going to use, if you haven't seen those before, the little tubes from Amazon, they work a lot better than the big one. You're not wasting so much. When you go and press this in, if you don't like it and it didn't line up perfectly, you can just take it out and turn it. It isn't going to matter, but we do want to score up this surface here, and that's just simply, you know, taking an X-Acto knife and doing some of that, so that way that glue really has something to bond to. But let me get some ducting tape in there, see what that looks like, and then we'll see about gluing this up. Now, the nice part about using that aluminum ducting tape, guys, is it really conforms into the foam. It's really not going to blow out of there if you press on it. So we're going to go ahead and take our exhaust nozzle now, and we're going to get some foam tack here. I'll take out my pieces of carbon. Stick that down in there. And now we're going to go ahead and cover this thing up. Get some on those pieces of carbon right there. That just gives a little something more for that stuff to stick to. And now we can go ahead and fit this in and try and line it up the first shot and see how she goes. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's get that dried up and see what happens. The next step is I'm going to take some, this is burnt umber. This is just acrylic, and put it on a rag. And here at the midpoint of these nozzles, I'm just going to literally coat all the way around with these things. Like that. There. And now we're going to get a clean rag. We're going to wipe it all off. And now it gives it that nice brownish kind of rusted silver look. I think that looks incredibly perfect. One of the final touches we're going to give it is we're just going to use some more spray paint. This is actually acrylic spray paint. And I'm just going to spray some black on there and literally take a finger and smudge around just to give it some staining and different discolor on the inside and just a tad on the outside. That stuff you feel kind of as you're doing this gets tacky pretty quick and dries pretty well. Just a little bit of touch. But for the most part, these things turned out absolutely amazing. Better than I envisioned that they would. And again, we used a little bit of that aluminum tape over the seams on the inside to make sure not only they hold and stay secure, but that it's clean all the way out. And if you really wanted to, you could line that whole duct with these. It proves to be a little bit more challenging with the covers off, but either way, that aluminum tape pushed down into the foam, it's not coming out. All right, guys, I hope you got those nozzles now under wraps. Let's go check out the rest of the upgrades that I did to my F-14 over a year ago when I first started flying this thing. You could check out the links to my playlist above. Guaranteed they're not great videos. They've gotten much better. One was even shot in a cell phone just to get the information out to everybody. I want you guys to continue to develop those modeler skills to showcase your talents down in your own layer, and there's no reason to spend absorbent amounts of money to get something made by somebody else when you can do the stuff at home. So let's give credit to where credit's due. Let's talk about this stuff. One of the first things that we have to discuss are reinforcement plates. The very first time I flew my F-14, I landed it on grass. I thought it was okay. As I'm taxiing back in, wings won't retract in, they're stuck. I'm like, oh, what is that? And here I checked, and right at these reinforcement blocks, these little pieces of plastic right here, the fuselage cracked on both sides and was literally, the back end of it was tapered down or hanging down, and it doesn't allow the wings to come in. So let me show you, I want to introduce you to my testbed F-14. This was the original one. I had tried contacting Motionrc at the time and said, hey, I have an issue. And, you know, it was my very first landing. I didn't think it was that bad. So needless to say, this fuselage has been gutted 3 to 4 times. And by that, I mean, I've hacked out foam, I've put blocks in, I put bars in, I put aluminum angles in, I re-glued, I put wood. I did all kinds of stuff to this one as my test bed before I finally came up with this plate right here, all right? And this is just a 1/8 inch plywood plate that I cut the carbon rod short, and I put it, and I made a notch right around that plastic seat. And I literally hocked the foam out right down to the base of that thing, and that 1/8 plate fit there just perfect. And I thought, man, I'm onto something. So I used Gorilla Glue, clamped it down on there, let it set overnight, adjusted the fuselage back to where it had to be. I reflew it again, and sure enough, it was perfect, no issues. So because this thing has been beat up so bad with so many different pieces in it, and now it was so heavy with glue and all those other materials, I thought, I'm going to get a new fuselage. And like I said, I didn't know this thing was as big a problem as it was. And all the research that I did after the fact, I found out everybody else knew it was a problem too. And there was no fixes out on the market. There was no pictures of anything out in the market. There was no information out on the market other than we know that this is a problem and people are trying to figure stuff out. So that's what I did. And ultimately, when I did my new one, before I ever flew it, I made the plates bigger. So what I did is I hawked out, again, the foam using a Dremel tool. I left an edge of foam all the way around, and I went all the way back to that elevation, came all the way back in over to your, call it the blue box, if you will, and came all the way up. So the plate now is much bigger. Again, cut the carbon rod just short of here, and Gorilla Glued those things down in. And how much do I have into this? A bottle of Gorilla Glue and cutting out a piece of ply that you could literally trace with a piece of paper on there and transfer it over. And that's exactly what I did. So those plates have been amazing, 50 plus flights and no issues. Some of the other things that I did to this by Chris Wolf, the RC Geeks recommendation, he had come up with a modification for the battery tray to make this one full-length battery tray. So you can get batteries all the way back for CG. And it also helped to strengthen up the front end. But one of the biggest problems that still plague this plane was the landing gear ripping out, especially on grass. People that fly off pavement, perfect. People that are perfect pilots, perfect. I am not. I fly off of grass, not a perfect pilot. Some of my landings, God, it looks like I never landed a plane before. But I was adamant I was going to come up with a repair. That's it right there. That was the repair that I came up with and passed along to everybody in RC groups to share the information for people to do the same. Again, a 1/8 piece of ply, and all I did was run 440 threaded rod, took the servo retract mount screws out, poked holes all the way up through, ran those 440 threaded rods up through. I put 4 lock nuts there, and as you can see on the underside, that's exactly what they look like there. So that's where the innovation had started. And I wish I remember the gentleman's name. I believe he was from Australia, reached out to me, and he says, "Hey, Brendan, I made a 3D printed file for this," and he showed me the picture and it looked really nice. It was a nice plastic bracket that was printed that was this wide. It was about that wide and had recess spots to hold your nuts. He did a great job. And you know what he did? He put the STL files up for everybody to share. So if you want it, go get it. It's on Thingiverse. I don't have a 3D printer and I don't do 3D printing, so I use the old wood and drill kind of method. So some of the biggest ones, all right, you can do there. You can simply cut that out if you want to. You do that when you put it together with the battery tray mod. That needs to be done then. This can be done at any time, and I recommend you do that before you fly it. As far as rates go, I took a lot of the RC Geeks recommendation and I made my own rates and mixes. Let me show you guys what those are. So the very first thing when I click on high rates for my ailerons, all right, high rates and low rates for ailerons don't change, and there's not much there. I found that it rolls pretty axially for me with just a little bit of throw there. And you will notice high rate and low rate on the tailerons, there is a difference on those. Same thing with elevators. There is a difference in high rates and low rates, as well as with the rudders. There's high rates and low rate differences there as well. Now with my flaps, I do not use full span flaps. I use a slow deployment flaps going all the way down. One of the things I noticed is that if you are going too fast with this thing, it will nosedive when you deploy those flaps. So that's the benefit of having slow deployment flaps. I do it on all of my stuff, and especially with full span flaps, you have to be very careful. Now, one of the things that I also set up, if you guys will be able to see this, we'll put the flaps all the way down. If for some reason I have them in that position and I actually bump my flight mode switch to pull the wings in, watch what the flaps do. Instantly pops them back up, and they're set to pop up fast. All right. The other thing that you will see during the wing sweep is that the rates change for elevators, and they get the ailerons, they get more aggressive. So there is high rates right there, elevator, and you'll see when the wings come back that they actually become more aggressive. Let me get that set right there. So hopefully you guys can see that change that's in there. And with the ailerons, again, because of the RC Geek's recommendation of how quick this rolls, I had dialed back my tailerons. So when the wings sweep back, you can see how they fall. They are less just by changing the wing sweep on there. So tailerons, the elevator portion of them, again, becomes more aggressive. The tail, as far as ailerons on the tailerons, if you will, they become less aggressive. Elevator more, ailerons less. So, you know, between the nozzles, between my own setup, one of the only other things that I have, and I can't even show you that down here, is I actually have a mix for throttle control that it actually gives you down elevator that can be turned on and off myself. Mix active. Mix inactive. As I fly. So I don't want it for takeoff, but under full throttle applications, I could flip that mix and it actually gives me a little down elevator on a progressive throttle curve the more I go forward. So that way it keeps it nice and level because I don't fly with a gyro. So nose mod you do yourself, battery tray mod you do yourself. These things you can definitely do yourself. If you're an avid modeler, man, get to it. But this thing is a fantastic bird. It never seems to die. It resurfaces. There's tons of information on RC groups that will help you along. There's tons of videos out there that'll help you along and materials you guys can, you know, just give it a whirl. But it's constantly, this model's resurging itself and coming back to life. It's fantastic. It's a great showpiece at the field or in the air. And there is nobody that doesn't hear that Top Gun music rolling out in your head, man, as you're taxiing out to the runway to take off. So, you know, I put the FMS V2 Platinums in this thing, complete power change. I put the Predator 100 amp speed controls in there. I fly off of grass. It made a world of difference. It has tons more authority getting off the ground, flying, doing different maneuvers. Again, we fly off a grass field, so that's what I have. But upgrade on the motors and speed controls as well. You'll find all that stuff in my playlist for the F-14. I hope you check it out. It'll be linked down in the description below, and I'll put a link as it goes over the screen there. But anyway, that wraps up the F-14 information. If you like it, like it. If you didn't like it, smash that button twice. I know there's a couple out there that just absolutely won't like it. That's cool. I'm fine with that. Sharing information, helping out modelers. That's what we do. So like, share, subscribe, hit that bell notification, select all. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching, guys. Happy flights. Peace out.